So welcome to the fourth video. We're currently in Port 3. When I'm doing travel photography, it's good not to just stick to landscapes. It's also good to showcase where you're staying, the town you're in. And one thing I like to do is explore where I'm staying and maybe incorporate a little bit of street photography. And also while we're here, I've brought along some products. I'm going to show you guys some product photography you can do while on location as well. For this shoot we're going to be using my Lee polarising filter. What this will do is it will allow me to cut the glare and reflection from the products I'm going to be shooting, and also some of the street photography I'm going to be doing, such as overlooking the harbour here, and it'll also help me to enhance the colours, making them pop a bit. Any colourful scenes we might come across, it will help enhance it. Incorporating these additional photography methods into your travels, it will really help your followers engage with you, and will also help you improve as a photographer and help you to diversify your work. Watch me lose this bottle though. So I've got my polarizer on. As you can see, there's some glare on the bottle. As I adjust this, it cuts the glare out, giving a much more professional image. I'm going to move the bottle, find different compositions and perspectives. Again, I'm going to adjust the polarizer to again cut the glare and really make that bottle pop and give it a much more professional look. While on location, you have to improvise, and it's not always as glamorous as it seems. So right now I'm currently placing the product on top of a bin, as you can see, and that's allowing me to place the item and line up my shot. I'm now going to shoot over to Portree Harbour. As you can see, all them colourful houses will make a real good composition. I'm going to adjust this to 24mm. I'm using the 1635 again, just to fit most of the space in. Again, I'm using my polarizer. So I'm lining up this shot. My current settings are f5.6, ISO 800, and my shutter speed is 1/25. Again, what I like about the Sony a7 III is the in-body stabilisation, accompanied with the optical steady shot of the Sony 1635 lens. Allows me to push my shutter speed down low and really get a sharp image still. And again, I'm using my polarizer to make those colours pop and help cut the glare off the water. I'm now going to switch. I really like the look of that White House itself over there. I'm going to switch to my 70-200 lens. I'm going to try and isolate that White House and get a go for a minimalist shot, and really try and emphasise how nice that house is. So now that we're done shooting some product photography and some kind of wide angled stuff, I'm going to switch to the 55 f1.8 and do some street photography. I really like this lens for this, as the shallow depth of field really helps make your images stand out. Gives you great depth, so I'm just going to switch that up just now. So I'm really loving how this leading lines of these double yellow lines is leading up towards this building, and I love how the light is lighting it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line the shot up down low, use the yellow lines to lead us straight to that old derelict building there. The nice thing about this Sony 55 f1.8 is, due to the low light, I'm setting my f-stop to 1.8, which is allowing more light in. I'm pushing the ISO to 800, and my shutter speed is going to be 1/80. And because the Sony has really good stabilisation and ISO capabilities, I'll still get a high quality image. I'll still get a high quality image that you wouldn't get out of any other camera. So when you get back to the car, it's always good to have a quick review of your images. And one thing I like to do while I'm doing that, or when I'm doing that, is if you cycle through, see what ones you like. If one of them really catches your eye, like this one, I really like this one. So what I will do is I'll rate this, which is on playback menu 1, and it's page 1. Fourth one down, it's called rating. So what that does, it allows you to put a 5-star rating, or any star rating up 1 to 5, and that embeds that into the metadata of the image. So when you import this into Lightroom, what you can do is filter the images by whatever rating you've put the image on. So if it's 5-star for instance, filter it by 5 stars and it will bring up this image and allow you to quickly edit it rather than sifting through 600 images to find that one. It's already there. You can start work on it straight away. When I'm shooting, if it's a bright sky like this, I'll have my ISO at 100, but I always turn because I shoot aperture priority mode, I'll turn my EV compensation down to about 0.7. And that helps retain the detail and the highlights in the sky. Now I'm using the Sony 1635 f4. This is so I can get a nice wide shot here of the boat and the coloured houses in the background. What I'm looking for is like a leading line in the sand, leading me up to the boat. So I'm going low to get a nice low angle to get some depth in the foreground. One of the benefits of having Instagram is it allows companies to find your work and reach out to you to offer like jobs. I was really surprised, I was really excited when I got offered my first paid shoot. It's something I've never done before, and I've never expected anything to come like that. One company reached out to me through Instagram called Jai Monaghan Watches, and they sent me out a few watches plus a 3-figure amount of money to get some content for them. And I still to this day shoot content for that company, so we've built up a long-standing relationship throughout my career, and I've also worked with bigger companies as well, such as Movement Watches and Huawei. That's all thanks to Instagram and being able to share my work and get noticed on that by these big companies. So we've set out for the day. We went to an epic location further along the road. It was a bit more exposed than it is here. So unfortunately we couldn't use the techniques I'm about to show you here at that location. At this location I'm going to be demonstrating a long exposure using my Lee Big Stopper, which is basically an ND 10 stop. This will allow us to get the milky water effect that everyone wants. It can make for an interesting shot, and to do that you have to use your tripod. It's really important to have a sturdy tripod because it is still a little bit breezy here. This will keep your camera stabilised. My tripod allows me to keep it low to the ground because it goes out wide, which also helps it be more sturdy, but with it being low to the ground also helps get a unique composition. So I'm just going to set up now and try and take some shots. So for this shot, the gear I'm using is my K&F tripod, my Sony a7 III, the Sony 1635 f4 and my Lee Big Stopper ND filter. The ND filter essentially is a pair of sunglasses, like I said earlier in the gear video. What that does is it cuts the light entering the sensor, and it allows for you to then have your sensor, have your shutter open, allowing more light in and allowing you to have that longer shutter speed to then capture the motion of the water, and it gives that smooth milky water effect that everyone wants. I'm just going to increase my aperture and cut this shutter speed down. So the settings I've got right now is 20-second exposure, an aperture of f5.6, and my ISO is 800 just now. And one of the reasons I've chosen Lee filters is because they tend not to have a colour cast on them, which is very important, because if you buy a cheaper ND filter, the cheaper ones tend to have a colour cast on them, which can really ruin your image and make it hard to edit. So that's a good reason to choose Lee. It's because of the colour cast that it doesn't have an issue with. And also, while using the Lee filter, I've not found that my image loses sharpness at all, which can be a problem with the cheaper filters as well. For this composition, we're trying to use the leading line of the river to lead us up through into the mountainous background behind. I'm going to slightly move my focus point up a little bit. It's also good to change your drive mode down to 2-second delay, because sometimes you introduce camera shake when you press that button. So pressing the trigger Allowing for the 2-second delay will make sure your camera is stable. You don't get any shaking because your shutter's open that long. If you get any slight movement, you're having a blurry image. So you can clearly see once you've taken the shot, it's easy to make adjustments. I've actually put the camera into crop mode a bit, which allows me, because I'm using the wide angle, it will allow me to punch in a bit. It will reduce the megapixel count, but because the quality of the A7 III is really good, you won't notice it. So you can see in the composition we went for a rule of thirds composition, having the main waterfall to the right, also a leading line of the river coming down, or essentially taking your eyes up to the mountain, and also the other far off mountain in the distance. The reason I've chosen that ND filter, the 10 stop or the big stopper, is essentially because I wanted to have a longer shutter speed. Don't think a variable ND filter would have been sufficient for this. The reason I never chose an variable ND filter was because the ND gives me 10 stops, whereas the variable ND only had a few stops, like a couple of stops, so I had to get that 10 stops of reduction. And also, I don't think it's a good place to use the polarising filter because it's not the type of shot where we would use that filter. There's not much glare happening. You maybe could use it if you wanted to pop the greens, but I don't think it would happen in this location. So I've chosen the 10 stop filter, and yeah, it worked out well, as you can see in the image that we're going to post up here. I'm really happy with the shot I got here thanks to my Lee big stopper. It really helped me achieve what I was looking for. And that's a wrap. We're going to head back. So now that we're finished with our shoot, I'd like to take you into Lightroom and share with you my editing process. This is the Develop tab we're in Lightroom, and this is all the tools we have on the right hand side here. I like to have this set to solo mode because it can be a bit of a pain if you have each tab open and you have to scroll down to find the correct tab that you're looking for. So having it in solo mode only opens one tab, and that saves you time when editing, speeding up your workflow. So the first thing I always do when I get my image into Lightroom and I'm starting editing is I start by straightening the horizon if needed and sorting my crop. Now, because I mostly post on Instagram, I always start with a 1:1 crop. This allows me to see how my image is going to look on my feed, because Instagram feeds are 1:1 squares. So I will align that so that it looks good and how it's going to look good in my feed. I will then change the crop to 4:5. I'll press the X key because it switches to landscape orientation, so I'll press the X key to make that portrait again. And I'll hold in the Alt key or the ALT key and drag it out and press enter. And that's us. I'm happy with that crop. You want to post 4:5 on Instagram as well because that gives you the most real estate on the platform and scrolling down, so that's the maximum you're allowed, so why not maximise it. Let's start with the basic tab. So I'm pretty happy with the white balance just now. I might adjust it later if needed. I'm happy with the exposure as well. I'm not going to touch the contrast just yet, we'll add that in using the tone curve. So here we have the exposure slider, the shadows slider, whites and blacks sliders. Now each one of these affects a different part of your image for the exposure. Highlights being the sky, shadows being the sort of mid-tone area of the image. You can see that affects a large part of the image here. The whites is predominantly going to be the sky here. You can see if I slide it up too much, it will go red. And if I slide this black bit down, it should go blue. And these are my alert symbols, which I've checked up here. And that will show you if something's blown out or severely underexposed. That's the clipping tools, so it's good to have them checked to keep you right when editing. So yeah, let's begin. So we're going to start by lowering the highlights ever so slightly, just to get some detail in the sky. And also we'll lift the shadows a bit. Lift the whites a tad, just to help make that sky pop a little bit, even though there's nothing really much there but mist and cloud. It'll help brighten it up a bit, and we'll lift the blacks as well to around 45. And one thing I always like to do is add a slight bit of negative clarity to my image. I feel that this helps add a subtle dreaming feel to the image. So yeah, I have that on most of all my images. Yeah, so let's move on to the tone curve now. If you ever want to check the before and after, you press the right hand / key. Before, after. You can see we've raised the exposure slightly using those sliders, adding more detail into the shot and increasing the dynamic range of the shot as well. So let's move on to the tone curve. So this is a very powerful tool for adjusting the contrast and exposure of your images. You can also use this to help maintain feed consistency. If you have a similar tone curve across all your images, that will help maintain consistency on your Instagram feed. So I'll start by placing a point at each intersecting grid line. So it should have 5 points. Down here is the shadows. Up here is the highlights. Well, in between here is the midtones. Up here being the lights. And down here being the darks. So we're going to start by lifting the darks a tad. We'll roll off the highlights. We'll bump up the lights. You can see that a change in the sky ever so slightly. We'll move the dark slider down. This will create some contrast in the darker areas of the image. And we shall move this middle one down a bit, just to add some more contrast in here as well. So we'll have a slight S-curve going here. With the lifted blacks giving a slight faded look. Now I'm going to be moving on to the colour tab. Now if your colour tab doesn't look like mine, you might have HSL selected, which will make it look like this. I like to go through each colour individually, so you can click colour and you'll have the same tab as mine. So let's start with the red channel. I don't think there's any reds in here, so I'm not going to adjust anything really. I'll just pull the saturation down a tad and lift the luminance. That will help wash out slightly if there's any. Let's move on to the orange. Again, we're going to pull down the saturation here and lower the luminance. You'll see there's slight orange in this image, so I'd like to darken that. I'd like to pull down the luminance a tad there. Move on to the yellows. You can see yellow's probably our main colour in this image, so I want to shift that to the right, make it more green. And I'll drop the saturation a tad. Lift the luminance. Check the before and after. It's looking pretty good so far. Go into the green tab. Just a slight bit of green in the foreground. Warm that up a bit so it blends in a bit better. And drop the saturation. It's catching my eye too much there. Move on to the aqua tab. Don't think there's any aqua in here, but I like to always shift that to the right. And we'll take saturation down a tad. You normally get some aquas and blues in the sky. Same again, don't think, yeah, there is a slight amount of aqua and blue in the sky here, so just make a subtle change to that. Drop the saturation down so it blends in a bit better to the sky. You don't notice it. Drop the saturation down a touch as well. And moving on to the purple tab. I don't like purple, so I'll shift them a bit and take it right out. Same with pink, I don't like having that in my images, so I'll move them to the right and I'll take some saturation out too. So I'm just going to head down to the calibration tab. Again, this lets us massively change our colours and get the desired look. So I'm just going to adjust the reds, push them to the right a tad. The greens, so push them to the right a tad as well. You can see what it's doing. If you go left, it's going way too green. If you go to the right, it's adding a touch more yellow in here. And again with the blues, That's fine there. Next we're going to head up to the colour grading tool, or tab. And what I do in almost all my images as well is add some blue into the highlights. I usually use 223 and 7. And that helps maintain feed consistency, along with the tone curve as well. I'll then go to the detail tab, add some sharpening, bring up the masking. If you hold in the left Alt key and drag the slider out on the masking tab, this will have your sharpening only affect the outline of the image rather than the full image, so it's a much more cleaner way to sharpen your image and reduces the noise. I'll set the noise reduction to 30 as well. That's standard across every one of my images. We'll go down to the effects tab and add a vignette to the image. What this does is it helps draw the eye into the subject. If I slide it all the way down here, you can see it's far too much, but you can see what it's doing. So you're focusing on that rock pinnacle there. So we're going to have that at -10. That's pretty much on all my images as well, -10. So let's do a before and after. We're now going to move on to selective editing. This is where the magic happens, and this is where your images really starts to stand out and pop. What I want to do here is I want to make this rock pinnacle pop and stand out more, and it's a bit warm looking, so I'm going to make that pop. I'm going to add a linear gradient filter here at the bottom, and maybe add a radial filter to the right here. But let's get going. I'm going to select the masking tab, start with the brush, double click effect. That will reset the sliders. Make sure auto mask is checked. That will keep you within the lines of whatever you're painting so it doesn't go out. And we're going to set the clarity to 30, texture to 15, and we're going to start painting. Now I like to have the overlay selected while I'm painting so that I can see when I'm painting. If yours isn't showing up, if you press the O key, that will show up and allow you to see where you're painting and where it's been applied to. So that's that brushed in there. I'm going to press the O key again to remove the mask. You can see already that's looking good, it's nice and crisp. But it's a bit warm, so we're going to lower the temperature down. This should help make the rock more grey and stand out a bit. Add a tad contrast onto this as well, just to make it more punchy. I'm happy with that. I now want to add a linear gradient filter to the bottom. So I'm going to drag that up, double tap effect, I'm going to lower the exposure, 1.35 is fine, bring the clarity down, and maybe drop the saturation a tad. What this does, this is going to help draw your eye from the foreground into the rock pinnacle, which is the main subject here. I felt that the reason I done that was because I felt, as good as it is having foreground to add depth, sometimes it can be distracting, so it's good to darken that, but you've still got the effect of having depth, but it's not as distracting as it would be if you didn't have the filter applied here. Next, I'm going to add a radial filter from the right hand side here. It's going to be a large one, and I'm going to tilt it ever so slightly. I'm going to set the feathering to 100. I'll double tap effects again and lift the whites a tad to around 35. And what this is doing here, this is going to add some, if you press the O key you'll see the overlay, and this is going to add some fake light from the right hand side of the image. This will help it stand out a bit better as well. Yep, I like how that's looking. Now, going to check the white balance, have a little play with that. Nah, I'm happy how it was. Maybe adjust the white balance on the rock a bit. Yeah, that's much better. So what I've done is I've brought that down so it's made it more grey and standing out a bit better. So yeah, I think that's just about ready to post. There's a few distractions in here, so I'm going to remove them using the heal tool, which is this one here. Make sure heel's selected, and let's start by removing the slight distractions that we have. All you have to do is click on them, and Lightroom does a good job of choosing what to fill the hole in with, basically. The odd occasion though, like, it doesn't do a good job and you have to manually correct it. Like this one here, it's chosen a bit of foreground to fill in there, so if you've got if you're pixel peeping, you'll be able to see that. So we're going to bring this up and choose a bit of the grass nearer to where it's been healed. And that one there. So any sort of slight distractions we're going to remove. This little bit of white up here. Take that rock out as well. Yep, I'm happy how that's looking. I might see if I can adjust the grass, see what it looks like if it's green, more green. Yep, I like how that looks. So yeah, that one's good to post. What I'll do now is right click and we'll go to export and press export again. I'll quickly run through my export settings. So up the top it's export to, choose folder later. Image format is JPEG, quality is 100, colour space is sRGB, resolution 300 pixels per inch, output sharpening is for matte paper and it's standard, and metadata is copyright only. And then what we'll do is we'll hit export. So that was my editing workflow. Hopefully you're able to take some points out of that and implement it into your own. And now here's some of my top tips. We're back in our hotel now after our final day shooting. Thank you so much for tuning in and following us on my travels. I hope you could take away some value from what you've learned here. We're going to go over a couple of tips on what we've learned here today. Tip number one, contextualise your work. Don't just stick to doing landscapes, try and incorporate different aspects of photography into your travels. It will allow you to diversify yourself and also to create more engaging content for your followers to enjoy. Tip number two, we touched on long exposures. It's always good to take a 10-stop ND filter with you if you want to try long exposures of, if it's windy, such as moving clouds over such as unique locations such as a store, or like take a big stopper with you if you want to shoot waterfalls during the day and get the milky water, and also carry a polarising filter with you. It helps cut the glare off the water, and also if you're doing any product photography it can also help cut the glare, giving a much more professional image. And my final tip for this video would be have fun, enjoy yourself, but also take care and be safe. I'd like to say a special thank you to Sony and Lee Filters who have supported me on this journey on my travels. But most importantly to you guys watching this, I hope you get real value of what you've learned, and I hope you enjoyed following me around Isle of Skye. Tag your photos online using the hashtag WexOnlineMasterclass so we can share your work and help get you noticed. You can find my Instagram searching my handle at It's Tommy's World. I'd like to hear from you guys. Let me know what you thought of the video. You can even send me some of your images and I'll help give you some tips and see if you can improve. Thanks very much for watching, guys.